Lana Brazil. Professor Charles, are you ready to deliver your speech now?
Yes, I'm gonna share the screen. Just let
Okay.
me check if it all will work fine. Can you see and hear me? It's all okay?
Yes, yes, it's visible.
Let's try to change the slide, okay?
Okay.
Um, so, greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Um, it's a pleasure to be participating in the 2023 International Conference on Mathematics, Computation, and Modeling in China. Today, I will cover some new issue mixing mathematics and social science. And nowadays, this topic is very new because we lack mathematical modeling of it. So I'm going to be talking about theoretical background to trying to influence you, mathematicians, to produce new research in these fields. My name is Charles Roberto Teles. I work for the moment at the Secretary of State in Paraná, Brazil. My research field lies within the public service and use of mathematical modeling to tackle many limitations we usually find in the public sector. I'll be presenting a research entitled Restorative Justice, an equation for justice. It is not yet finished in terms of article publication, but it will be submitted for evaluation soon with today's presentation data fully explained, the methods described and the results obtained. For this moment, I would like to briefly present it. My proposal of speech today will cover some aspects of restorative justice in the view of mathematics and social sciences that were originated from a parallel project developed by the Secretary. The subject of approximation of mathematics to social science was observed as a well-posed problem, and the equation design prior to the functions and derivatives reach a satisfactory point in terms of graph analysis, avoiding to observe the problem without initial mathematization of it, and therefore enabling calculus to be performed properly. However, today, only the mathematical assumptions of the problem will be explained. I'm going to present first the restorative justice concept, and later its approximation to a scenario of which, in our case, is public schools, and finally, the mathematical assumptions for it. Early in 2022, a project started at the Secretary of State for Education entitled Culture of Peace, authored by Professor Flavio Mesquita and assisted by Dr. Sineva Campoli. And in my job role of analyzing projects from a technical cooperation agreement between UNESCO and the Secretary of State, it was observed a limitation of how restorative justice could be monitored in terms of mathematical tools or even extract metrics or indicators to follow the actions generated by it. Reading about the subject in the scientific literature, I noted that I wasn't alone about the lack of a scientific instrument for the project to achieve its goals. And it was, and still now, it is mandatory in order to offer to the school population new methods of restoring peace and justice for students, school staff, and external community. Well, let's talk a bit about restorative justice now. Restorative justice is based on the search for the solution of conflicts that occur in social life where, according to Howard Z., restorative justice emerged in the 1970s as an effort to correct some of the weakness of the Western legal system, while building on its strengths. From that time on, with concepts more developed and adopted worldwide as a method of trying to control and mediate conflicts, restorative justice assumes a broader scope of utility for social issues, not only in the juridic fields, but educational, community, and legislative domains. How restorative justice works? According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, restorative justice refers to a way of responding to crime or to other type of wrongdoing, injustice, or conflict that focus primarily on repairing the damage caused by the wrongful action and restoring, insofar as possible, the well-being of those involved. It reflects a more relational theory of justice because it emphasizes the restoration of respect, equality, and dignity to the relationships affected by the wrongdoing. Also, according to the European Forum of Restorative Justice, the general values of it are: first, restorative justice works within the boundaries and protections of human rights and the rule of law. Second, it does not discriminate on the basis of gender, race, religion, ethnicity, or sexuality. Third, it supports the active participation of people within democratic societies as active and equal citizens. But these general values can also be specific. There are variations of values following the general rules, but for different contexts, they can assume a new role or definition. The ones used by the project I have in touch with for education, and also as an example for you, was the ones used in the Canadian Department of Justice that can be found in the document entitled Principles and Guidelines for Restorative Justice Practice in Criminal Matters. And the values used are reparation, focus on acknowledging and repairing the physical, emotional, and financial harm caused by crime and meeting the needs of those affected. Respect, treat all participants with dignity, compassion, and equal consideration. Voluntariness, ensure the participation of victims, offenders, and community members is voluntary and based on free, informed, and ongoing consent. Inclusion, foster and support the meaningful participation of those affected, including victims, offenders, their friends, their families, and their communities. Empowerment, enable participants to communicate openly and honestly, and to have an active role in determining how to address their needs as they see them. Safety, attend to the physical, emotional, cultural, and spiritual safety and well-being of all participants. Participation in restorative justice should not result in further harm to any participant. Accountability, assist those who have caused harm to acknowledge and take responsibility for harm and reparation. And finally, transformation, provide opportunities for understanding, healing, and change, and contribute to the restoration and reintegration of victims and offenders. When the project was being developed last year and some actions start taking place in schools, several types of actions, these procedural tasks and theoretical background were being developed in school context, and it was noticed a missing point of the project concerning how to measure, to monitor, and predict restorative justice outcomes. Despite much research was settled in the judiciary environment and many others in the educational field, outcomes are analyzed differently. While judiciary worries about recidivism patterns of restorative justice application, education tackles restorative justice interventions to achieve long-term outcomes with parameters as collective behavior, community's culture for achieving peace, well-being of students, and overall school individuals' happiness, and new leaders' appointments to extrapolate school borders. By differentiating the concept of restorative justice applied in the legal area, for example, with the application in the field of education, one can observe the possibility of expanding the phenomenon of restorative justice as an event that overcomes the limit of an isolated case of the participating individuals. These limitations are overcome by the area of education in its primary objective of spreading altruistic behavior and knowledge of peace in society. The area of education has shown that there is a promotion of the values obtained by successful case in a contextualized manner in the environment in which they were generated. In this sense, a broader geography of the culture of peace can be observed, which can be a school, an environment, a classroom, a family, a municipality, and so on. Well, that's where mathematics can start doing a good job in this field of study. It seems we just need to transform some context, phrasing, and some event interactions into a mathematical model to be able to apply a technique or even develop a new methodology. To illustrate the needs of new methodological approach and for the events patterns to be tracked, recently on 21 September 2021, I studied entitled Comparative Statistics in the Field of Restorative Justice with the authors Arthur Hartman and Sophie Seedles, state in its abstract, international regulations and recommendations urgently demand to promote and implement statistics in the field of restorative justice. Already, the UN Basic Principles on the use of restorative justice programs in criminal matters claim that member states should promote research on and evaluation of restorative justice programs. And of course, for this statement, it can be observed in the field of education too. Also, in the same abstract, it states, finally, the Council of Europe recommendations concerning restorative justice in criminal matters say that restorative justice services should develop appropriate data recording system. We could list here many other references about this demand in all the science, but just one more called my attention to share with you today. In 2021, in the European Forum for Restorative Justice Conference, Cristina Vasilescu proffered observations on her speech entitled Measuring, Researching, Narrating, Discussing the Social Impact of Restorative Justice. She used, that you can see now, on her presentation, a slide from the working paper entitled Broadening the Range of Designs and Methods for Impact Evaluations to assign tasks for restorative justice new methods to be developed relating to mathematical field, as you can see in this table. You can see also in this table several design approaches trying to elucidate how to achieve a good performance for numerical results, solutions, the form of variables involved in processes, and the possible techniques to apply. At this table, just to mention a few, you can find words such as statistical modeling, econometrics, control, confounders, congruence analysis, network analysis, systems, causal factors, and so on. Well, I have no more doubt that this is a global task towards human being peace culture that extends not only to us, but to the non-human environment around us as a consequence. As far as we can learn to apply and disseminate restorative justice in schools, not only in the judiciary environment, as a new peacemaking culture, we are also leading the best principles to share with society everywhere, and mathematical can play a beautiful role on it by providing policy and decision makers for private and public institutions tools to access communitarian needs and new legislation. And we are not only speaking here about the small daily problems humans face in their lives, but you can escalate it to a broader and broader context, as we can see nowadays. We need to understand long-term healing and reintegrative outcomes for social life are not only provided in many cases of isolated success, but they can be achieved in the perspective of social behavior as an educational formal or informal process to be disseminated among individuals. Just to give you an example, to achieve it within a point of view of a school, 10 scopes under the view of restorative justice values, the Canadian ones, were defined as a set of possible domains where actions to be performed could be listened to. These scopes cover educational aspects where restorative justice concept can be applied to a triggered action. In this way, any possible action to be taken can be situated in one or more scopes. They are for education. And the number one is culture of peace that comprehends human values for peace and justice composition, the conceptual framework. Number two, strategic values of the institution and people, comprehending governance and leadership. Number three, school organization, that is pedagogy, decision-making, and share management. Number four, qualification, which includes training staff, leaders, formation, and actions triggering. Number five, communication, involving people engagement, adherence, and behavior transformation. Number six, relationship, that involves culture formation, sworn behavior, dialogue, and depicted values. Number seven, school times and spaces relating to workflows, public administration, physical space, and outer school space interactions, transformation in the community. Number eight, student and youth protagonism, comprehending empowerment, voluntarism, and equality among people differences. Number nine, social emancipation that is related to community or other public institutional engagement, reflecting schools' influence. And finally, number 10, school environments that comprehend learning development, teaching performance, student attendance to the school, student behavior, implemented group activities, and drugs, crimes, and bullying reduction. Now I ask you, why I have been speaking with you in a mathematics conference, a social science brand of study, and gave you the concept, the values, specific values, and scopes of restorative justice? The answer is to give you a glance of how our mathematical problem need to be modeled. Observe until now that we try to encompass all this information and structure of the project application into a mathematical model, but at least theoretically. We need now to develop a mathematical methodology to be able to track restorative justice actions within scopes, values, and interventions, to be able to understand and transform the course of an event, consisting of this method of strategically insert entries of restorative justice procedures, expected outcomes, monitoring visual tool of actions, scope, values in a given geography, time, or established set of elements. Therefore, at this moment, we can identify we need the methodology that seeks to elucidate the phenomenon of restorative justice as a complex event in the social tissue, nonlinear, and that requires metrics and indicators to visualize the events in a systematic and predictive way. Here, we find some mathematical assumptions that can help us to sketch the problem of modeling it as an equation. Firstly, our needs for the moment are towards the outcome expectation. So we can ask ourselves these questions: how to monitor it, or how living organisms can be induced to produce determinate results. Can it be induced or correct or even really predicted? As far as we can get an equation for it, calculus could be applied to every action and its interactions, or even the whole of actions as a well-posed problem case. Of course, there is no direct reaching point for it yet. Therefore, we need to clarify how the event happens exactly, which are the physical or biological behavior within it. I have listed some of the parameters that can be found for this task. And the first one is the initial conditions. The initial conditions of any given restorative justice event might vary in time and space as you define an action and scope of this action and expect restorative values to be positive. But an identical experiment is capable of giving a totally distinct output. It happens because an individual's beliefs and convictions do not operate as your chosen parameters, even if they are marking a front line of interactions and in a scenario designed for it. Note, too, that we are not only thinking here about the organic domain of the problem, but surely you're going to find institutional beliefs and convictions as well. Following this path, imagine you are going to probably find heteroscedasticity of outcomes in a scatter plot of expected positive values and negative values of restorative justice party formation. And being it for every source of any given action triggered, that could be an identical, similar, or distinct event. Initial properties of each event may or may not produce perturbations in the behavior of the expected event. That is, we do not have a very defined probabilistic scheme along each type of triggered event, but monitoring methodology can help to organize and lead the event towards expected outcomes. Number two, probability distribution. People, actions can vary in probabilities to happen. That's what we are observing so far. And we cannot be sure of how an individual will behave towards determined task. Well, we have here a black box, a single and unique feature that prevents us to make this culture something constantly positive. Some argue Bayesian statistics can be fully suitable to be able to monitor and predict restorative justice reaching goals. The problem is not exactly the goals, but the goals intensity, which has a dimension both in the objective domain as well as the subjective reasoning of the individual, being influenced by decision making at any given time and with known and unknown patterns formation. We are dealing with a phenomenological formation of empirical relations. Since we are dealing with several sources of information processing coming from individuals and possibly random responses, as well as pre-formulated new tasks given by the individuals themselves, institutions, and actors' role, trying to organize it within a probabilistic framework can be not an easy task. And associated with it, you might find the black box in the processes. Science individuals or actors' role can perform outputs totally unexpected, both for quality of actions performance as well as events, directions, types, sources, and else. Bayesian statistics can make it difficult to read a numerical value as a representation of a complex reality. But as far as we are out of the domain of individual behavior beliefs and convictions, the initial conditions and event expression, we can observe at a posterior time more empirical causation of human behavior in reality. From this point on, Bayesian statistics can be applied as a tool. But I still believe that it, for specific tasks. Number 3, swarm behavior and nonlinearity. This research understands that the phenomenon addressed by restorative justice does not occur only in isolation on the social web. In other words, it can occur organically, not only in the individuals who participate in the mediation process of conflict, but externally affects a community, the family, and possibly other agents who know or are close to those involved in the conflict. Thus, it can also assume an autonomous or non-autonomous collective behavior in social life. A swarm effect of events can be true, as well as the uncertainty of outcomes still can happen. Calculus and performances. It can thus be identified that successful or failed events of each type of experiment and the variables of the problem can extend to the first, second, or who knows, high-order formation of individual and collective ideals for the promotion of a culture of peace. That means we can sometimes hardly find a unique solution for the problem. Also, iterative process might apply, as well as chaotic behavior for our triggering actions, which can allow the formation of replicates of the process, or even unusual actions that are still able to happen, that are not the object of known methodologies to track restorative justice patterns formation. This topic deals with the effectiveness and efficacy of the phenomenon of applied restorative justice and the possibility to transform the social events into numerical representations, of which sometimes is the only way to identify some patterns formation and tenuous tendencies among multiple independent variables. Number 5, statistics and computation. One thing important to say, despite of so many distinct features, since we are dealing with organic life in its full expression with the environment, all these points can be measured, tracked, and driven, as far as we have the right tools to observe what lead an event to success or failure, and get the learning of it. Strong efforts to separate the ubiquitous information of the system, generation or reordering workflows, and finally, removing fallacies of the problem will probably be required at most. Iterations of the same action for multiple contexts might promote the possibility of comparison of results, being the positive or negative skills, a learning process in arrangement with the initial conditions of this experiment, thus trying to reduce probabilistic uncertainty, identifying swarm intelligence, and analyzing variables, performance among every trio. Algebraic observations. We can say creativity for restorative justice actions is an important point, but being able to analyze the volume of actions triggered and its outcomes, that is the true scientific contribution to the topic. The possibility of visualizing actions within scopes and which results they bring in restorative justice can allow management of conflict in time and space. Science, since it is possible to integrate it to a method of identifying geographic locations and time as a parameter of heating or freezing, monitoring aspects with Boolean characteristics of logic in conjunction, disjunction, and negation of a set of elements. The Boolean dimension of the obtained results can also allow the creation of integration and differentiation functions of the elements that generate the actions, scopes, and restorative justice values, allowing the mathematization of the event for the purpose of topological visualization. And now, the last assumption, the black box. Exploratory data analysis needs to be applied to restorative justice goals and empirical parameters of the problem to be able to model an equation for data and information visualization. This model can generate numerical results to any given scenario of social conflicts to allow further calculus and statistical analysis of samples and avoid black box frequencies, of which is typically normal for this issue. An equation to be modeled should help with graph visualization of the events, and therefore to produce a remodeling performance of actions, scopes, and restorative justice goals along time versus space. By being able to reveal the black box of this problem, positive human coexistence practice prior to the common justice can be incorporated into society in a structural and systemic way. The whole methodology should allow obtaining information to be able to generate new actions to be triggered, implemented, monitored, as well as to generate a learning about the social phenomena linked to a culture of peace in society. After conceiving this initial and theoretical overview, I believe we can start to compose a restorative justice equation to further advance to metrics and indicators, where efficacy can be measured in terms of quantity and quality aspects. An important point of this speech is to highlight that restorative justice must be socially disseminated as an institutional component prior to the judicial system. Also, restorative justice does not generate lasting effects in the educational field and beyond through socially generated collective behavior. Thus, it is recommended that governments implement not only procedural methods for applying restorative practice, but also the use of monitoring methodology to have a minimum control of the scopes, actions, and types of restorative values generated that are being disseminated. I personally believe when mathematics be able to orientate this field of knowledge, we are going to have a broader overview of the problem, scaling it to multi-dimensions of society's roles. Well, after all this information I have given so far, an initial equation was developed to endure these previous points. The research conducted will not be presented here due to time and because we are in the process of collecting empirical data to apply in the equation. I am going, with the permission of the event staff, make this presentation available at the YouTube channel for those interested in revisiting these brief explanations and the slides. Any question, critics, or contributions, please let me know. And here in my information contact. I thank you very much for the opportunity to present this important issue to the scientific community and leaders everywhere who can reach this knowledge of ultimate importance to the society. I wish you a wonderful day of events. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, Professor Charles. Thank you for excellent speech. Is there any questions for Professor Charles? If there's no questions, you can, if you still have questions after the conference, you can send an email to Professor Charles to get feedbacks. And Professor Charles, I know you are stirring up now.